Hi, everybody, and welcome. We're going to get started in a few minutes. Just let everybody dial in. All right. Thank you, everyone. Greetings from the hilltop, and welcome to today's webinar, Cooking with Food Network star Melissa Day-Rabian, sponsored by Georgetown McDonough's Office of Alumni Relations. We're so glad to have you with us. Thanks for taking time out of your workdays to connect virtually with Georgetown McDonough. My name is Lauren Apicella. I'll be off camera today, but I will be facilitating today's cooking class with Melissa. Before we get started, I would like to share a few webinar tips and reminders. First, this webinar is being recorded. The recording of this webinar will be made available on our website in the next few days, and you'll receive a link to the recording in a follow-up email, which will also contain a post-webinar survey for you to take, information on upcoming events, and more ways to stay connected to Georgetown McDonough. We will take questions throughout the webinar. Please send in your questions as you have them using the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And if you're having any technical difficulties or other issues, please submit those concerns to me via the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Now, I'm excited to turn this over to Melissa and learn how to make sesame crusted salmon with miso sauce.
Unmute, there we go. Perfect. Like my fat thumbs are like, unmute. Hello. Thank you for having me, Lauren. Thank you guys for joining me. This is so fun. I love that we can use technology, like the very thing that we said was separating us all is now bringing us together. So I am delighted to come to you live from my kitchen in Coronado, California. And I know that you guys are all over. I know that you've received the shopping list for today's recipe. So I think some of you might be cooking along, some of you might not be. It's recording, so you can always look at it later. Or this is easy enough that if you just want to sit and relax and watch, and then after we're done, like literally you can pull this together in like 20 minutes. This is a really simple recipe. So, so thank you so much for giving me an hour of your time. It's a delight to be here and to connect with fellow Georgetown folks. As Lauren said, feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar. And I'm going to try to project and talk loud because when wired mics, I wasn't able to cook far enough, and my AirPods weren't working. So there you go. I'm just going to have to talk loud to my iPhone. But there you go. I hope that you can hear me. And if you have any problems, just put it in the Q&A and any questions. Okay, so let's make some sesame salmon with miso sauce. Now, today I want to teach you this recipe, but more than just this recipe, I want this to be a strategy that you guys can make on your own. Like when you're, like on a busy Tuesday night and you're like, what am I going to get on the dinner table? These are some really simple ingredients that you can have in your home that you can then make. You can make a chicken out of this. You could use, tofu. You could do a lot of different versions of this recipe. So basically what I'm gonna teach you is how we're gonna bread or crust a piece of fish and how we're going to get a nice crust on it and then finish it in the oven. And I'm also gonna show you how to make a really flavorful aromatic sauce using miso, which is one of my favorite ingredients to have in your house. I have white miso. Yellow miso is also a great mild option. The darker you get, the more flavorful the miso is. So I do find white and yellow to be really versatile ingredients to have in your pantry. So miso is just fermented soybean paste. Also, it lasts like a long time. Like I want to say like a couple of years. Okay, well here it says June 15th, 2021. So what would that like? Probably this was made a few months ago. Anyway, over a year. You can keep this in your fridge, and just a spoonful of miso goes a long way. Adds that umami flavor, that deep savory flavor, and a complexity really quickly. So we can talk a little bit about some other things that you can do with miso, but like for for marinades. It's salty and rich. Also, here's a really fun little idea for your miso is if you want to swap out a spoonful of peanut butter for miso in like your peanut butter cookies, just like a spoonful, that will add like a really rich, yummy depth of flavor. That's really kind of fun. So anyway, so have fun with that. Okay, so miso salmon. Okay, we're gonna start with, let's over here. We're gonna start with crusting our salmon. So let's do this. We're gonna use sesame seeds today. Now you could use nuts, you could use other seeds. If you don't like sesame seeds or if you're allergic to sesame seeds, you can use nuts, that's fine. You could also use like chopped up pumpkin seeds. You could even use almond flour and that would be fine. You could also use breadcrumbs, but breadcrumbs, they can fall off a little bit. So I might put breadcrumbs on the fish after you've seared the first side. But we're using sesame seeds. Sesame seeds, inexpensive, but they go rancid quickly. So either keep them in a fridge or just throw them out every year. So they're cheap enough that you can do that. Okay, so I like to put the sesame seeds, or anytime I'm breading something, I'll put it in a little paper plate because sometimes that it gets a little bit like kind of gloppy afterward, and then you can just throw the whole thing away. So we're just gonna take our salmon, just some beautiful pieces of salmon. I like wild salmon. You can get farm salmon. People sometimes ask the difference between the two in terms of nutrition. Salmon is actually kind of a group of fish species. So different salmons have slightly different nutritional profiles. So all that to say, salmon in general is an oily fish, high omega-3s. I love salmon from Alaska. And I will also confess that part of that is because I went to Alaska and I stayed on at a salmon fishing camp. So anyway, so I fell in love with Alaskan salmon, and also I really appreciated the efforts that they went to make the fishing sustainable. So that really convinced me. Okay, I've salted the salmon. So you want to salt, little pepper if you want to, and then just literally press the salmon into the sesame seeds. Okay, so if you're at home, little salt and pepper, and then press into the sesame seeds. We'll just do that. The fish that I bought already had all the pin bones removed, but just a tip that if you get your salmon home and you kind of feel the flesh and you feel some bones sticking out, use tweezers and kind of pull them out, kind of like an eyebrow, you know, with the direction of the bone. Does that make sense? That way you won't tear the flesh when you pull those little bones out. So if there are any pin bones remaining, just go ahead and pull them out with a tweezer. And our salmon is now crusted, okay? So we're gonna have crusted salmon and it's gonna have a delicious sauce on it. Crusting anything makes it feel special and it's super yummy. It just adds a little bit of texture and a little bit of flavor. So tuna would also be great to crust. Anything crusted is fabulous. So those sesame seeds, once you buy them, you'll find a million things to crust. All right, let's get those out of the way. All right, and I'm gonna wipe my hands down.
Is it?
Yes.
Is there a specific type of sesame seed you need to use, or can you use black and white, or?
Yes, thank you for asking. I'm using white, but you can use black sesame seeds, or you can use a mix. Honestly, I think the mix is actually the prettiest, but this is just what I had. So yes, you can use either one. And I have to tell you something. You know what else you can even do when you're crusting things? You can also add a little bit of, do you know everything but the bagel seasoning that has sesame seeds in it? And you can sometimes you can use that a little bit too in your crusting if you're interested. So just if you want to add a lot of flavor and it's, you know, late on a Tuesday and you need to get dinner on the table. So, okay, so our sesame is crusted. And again, here you could use something else to crust it if you wanted to. All right, let me get this out of the way. Oh, whoopsies, I think I just knocked things and I think I created visual problems. There we go. Okay, All right, so salmon here. Let's make the sauce that is going to go on top of the salmon. Now, this is the miso sauce. And actually what we're making here is a kind of beurre blanc. If you've ever heard that saying, that phrase before, beurre blanc is a sauce that is where you take aromatics and you steep them in liquid, including wine and usually a little bit of acid like vinegar, and you steep out the flavors of the aromatics, and then you strain out the aromatics and you whisk in butter to make it thick and creamy. So that's a beurre blanc. We're not making exactly a beurre blanc, but it's the same idea. This is a variation on a beurre blanc. So we're gonna put all of our sauce stuff in this pan, and then we're gonna bring it to a simmer and let the aromatics steep. So I said aromatics. By aromatics, I mean things that smell good. We're gonna use some smashed garlic cloves. So just take your garlic cloves, they're peeled, smashed, they're ready to go. So they're gonna go in. I'm gonna go ahead and start heating this up. And then some onion. This is sweet onion. And it's just like, you can see kind of a leftover hunk of onion. So if you don't have a leftover hunk, you know, take a nice big thick slice or whatever, put it on in here. And then we're going to add in some broth. I'm using chicken stock, but you could use vegetable stock, you could use fish stock. You know, about a half a cup. I'm putting in a little bit more just because I want it to kind of cover some of that onion. Okay, then I'm gonna add a little bit of rice wine vinegar. This is like a tablespoon, a little more if you want to.
Melissa, we have another question about rice vinegar, actually.
Yes, okay.
Can we use any kind of rice vinegar? Can we use premium, seasoned, Mirin? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so rice vinegar, I'm actually using lightly seasoned. You could use not seasoned, or you could use seasoned. The seasoned is gonna have more sugar and salt in it. This is sort of like in between, but yes, you can use any of the above. And you could even use just regular white wine vinegar, like that's fine. You don't have to go to the store if you don't have it. And then here, this is, let me see if I can even pull the top off of this. This is Mirin, which is a fortified sweetened wine, like a cooking wine. It's just a cooking wine, don't drink this. And just because it has a lot of sugar and some salt in it, we're gonna put a couple of tablespoons, but you could even use regular white wine here. So we're going with this sort of Asian flavor profile with the sesame seed and these ingredients, but let's just imagine for a moment that instead of sesame seeds, we were using, let's just say pecans. And then we could use just like plain old white wine and a little bit of white wine vinegar. Like we could make this sauce not at all Asian flavor profile. And that could be a whole different dish. And you could do it with salmon, or you could do it with like nice thin chicken paillards. Press the chicken paillards into chopped up pecans. The only thing you want to pay attention to is how fast your crust will cook and will it burn. So that's the only thing I would say to you, just sort of play around with. Sesame seed burns pretty quickly. You're gonna see we're only gonna cook it for a couple of minutes. Okay, so let's see, we've got our wine, our vinegar, our broth, we have our aromatics, we have onion, we have garlic, and then we're gonna add our miso. Now, the miso is, of course, giving us that umami, and it is taking us into that kind of Asian flavor profile. If you wanted to make this dish without the miso, that would be fine. And it'll just be a little bit of a looser sauce. It won't be quite as thick. You could put in a little bit of miso, and miso is really kind of, like I said, really umami and savory and salty. So without the rest of these sort of Asian profile ingredients, it's not gonna feel like an overly Asian flavor profile dish when you're doing like, you know, pecan chicken. Does that make sense? In fact, what I might even do is I might even introduce then in that case, maybe some Dijon mustard, which I wouldn't simmer because mustard doesn't love to be boiled, but I might whisk it in at the end instead to get a little bit of depth of flavor. So just about a tablespoon of miso, that's what it looks like. is going to go right on in here. It doesn't take a lot. Most of your recipes, and actually a tablespoon, I'm only making 2 pieces of fish, so I probably probably more than I needed to. But honestly, a teaspoon of miso in your soups, in any, like this, a little goes a long way, and it's amazing. And this is like a couple of dollars. Put it in your fridge. This will be great.
Melissa, if you can't get miso, can you use pre-made miso broth? Are there any alternatives you can use?
You know, that's a really good question because, you know, if you're like at like a 7-Eleven or something, sometimes you can't get miso. Most grocery stores, even small grocery stores, have miso. It's usually in the refrigerated section. Often where you might find the tofu, if you're getting refrigerated tofu instead of the Tetra Pak tofu, or it'll be by the like the tubs of dairy-free butter, or it'll be in the refrigerator section by the like the plant-based meat products, like the vegan mayonnaise, like that. Like it tends to be in that department. But if you don't have miso, if you had powdered miso broth, you could absolutely use that. That's going to have some of that umami flavor. And the other thing you could do is if you don't have it, you could also whisk in Dijon mustard at the end. Again, not here because right now it's coming to a boil. You probably can't see it, but it is coming to a boil. I'll just show it to you. It's starting to boil there. Or you know what you could do? You could put in a tiny bit of Worcestershire sauce. Now, Worcestershire sauce does have fish in it, so if for some reason you're making this tofu and you don't want fish, that's not an option. But Worcestershire sauce also has a lot of umami in it. Or you can even make a real quick mushroom broth that would add a lot of umami. So there's some great ways to get some of that umami flavor. I'm just going to go ahead and whisk this so that the umami, the miso kind of breaks up. And all I'm doing is I'm bringing all of the aromatics and the broth and everything to a simmer, and it's starting to smell amazing in here. And we're letting this broth kind of thicken a little bit and get seeped in a lot of that flavor from the onion and from the garlic that are starting to kind of break down and kind of blend into this broth. So we're gonna let this simmer for a minute or two, and then what we'll do, once we've let it boil for a minute or two, just to kind of get things going, there we go. Now we're just gonna turn it off and set it aside, okay? Well, let's set it right here. And we're just gonna let it sit. That's just gonna sit, and the longer it sits, the more flavorful it is. So we're just gonna set it aside. At home, when you're not like I'm doing, like chatting with you in Zoom, this will be a lot faster. So you'll bring it to a boil, kind of whisk it up for, you know, a minute or two, get it so it's kind of like starting to soften, and you know, the onion, and then set it aside and go about your business, and then you'll deal with that at the end. We'll make the sauce in just a couple of minutes. All right, let's get our salmon cooking. The good news about fish is it's really quick to make it. So it's great to think about as a pull together weeknight meal. That's what I was thinking about this meal. I thought this is a great weeknight meal that you don't necessarily have to make this exact version of what I'm making. And it comes together really quickly. So, so that you can feel like you're having something a little bit special, but not feeling overwhelmed by like, oh my goodness, I've got to make this whole big, huge recipe or something. So yeah, I get that. Been there, done that. Okay. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna start the salmon. If you haven't started your oven already, you'd wanna have your oven started. Sorry, I should have started with that. Oops. Go and turn on your oven real quick. Turn it on, whoop, real quick. Okay. Okay.
What are we heating our oven to? Sorry, what are we heating our oven to, Melissa? What temperature?
Yeah, so 375 is what you wanna have the oven to. You know, 375, 400, somewhere in that neighborhood. The good news with fish is that it cooks quickly. The bad news with fish is that it overcooks quickly. So you want to pay attention to not overcook, especially with salmon. Salmon, I will tell you, here's the trick to salmon, to cooking salmon. The trick to cooking salmon and not overcooking salmon is cook it for about a minute less than you think. That's really what it is. Like you're sure that, oh, this is when it's going to be ready. Actually, you needed to take it out 1 minute before then. Take it out like the minute before, like when you're thinking like, is it ready? Is it not? I don't know. That means it's ready. Take it out. Okay, I'm gonna put a little bit of oil into our pan, and I can feel it's quite hot. Is that right? Oh yes, that's not too bad actually. I turned it down too much. I panicked. It seemed like it was really, really hot. It started being really hot feeling. Okay, and then we're gonna put this guy right in here. Okay, so we're just gonna cook the salmon here for 2 or 3 minutes, just to get a nice crust onto the sesame side. So this idea of crusting your fish or crusting your protein on one side and giving it a nice sear on one side and then flipping it over and finishing it in the oven is a great strategy. So it doesn't need to be just this recipe. If you've got chicken cutlets, bread them in something and then saute them and then flip them over and finish them in the oven and then make a quick sauce. Throw some things into a pan, add some broth, boil it all up, strain out the the aromatics and whisk in butter and you've got a sauce. Like it's that easy. So we're just gonna get a nice little sear here. Why don't I take a quick question and then we'll see if we can flip over our salmon. Any questions over there, Lauren?
Yes, we do. First, could you just repeat instructions or the ingredients for the sauce real quick?
Yes, absolutely. So for the sauce, we have, oh, and by the way, I think you're all going to get the recipe by email. Is that correct, Lauren?
Yes, we will send the recipe. We've sent the ingredients before. We'll send the recipe after.
Yes, so
but for those who are cooking along, we have a couple questions about that.
And you will get the recipe too. Okay, but just so you know, broth is kind of like the biggest piece of it. So like half a cup or a little bit more. This is bone broth, but it can be any broth. Any chicken broth or fish broth. And then a little bit of vinegar. This is rice wine vinegar. And then a little bit of white wine, or any wine really. But I'm using Mirin, which is a fortified sweet wine. And then we use onion and garlic. We just put it all in here, brought it to a simmer. Oh, we put in, of course, the miso. And it's just now sitting there getting more and more flavorful. Okay, let's see how our good friend is doing. Let's see. Oh, I'm going to show it to you. Hold on, don't worry. I'm going to get you there because I know you guys can't see in here. Let's see. All right. Oh, by the way, you might notice that I'm using a non-stick pan, which I do for fish. I don't use non-stick pans a lot. But I do use them for fish and I do use them for eggs. I think that's pretty much all I use a non-stick pan for. Oh, crepes. Crepes are easier to make in a non-stick pan, but crepes are mostly eggs anyway, so there you go. Yeah, so it's worth it to me. So have a high quality non-stick pan that you can use for your fish. And then I just, even the ones that say no weird chemicals or whatever, I still replace them every year. Okay, so can you see that gorgeous golden crust? Obviously, the fish is not yet cooked, so we're going to put it into the oven to finish cooking, and that's going to take anywhere from 6 to 10 minutes or 11 minutes or something. Let me get that in. Don't go away. There we go. Sorry, I had to go down to the oven. All right, let me see if I have. Yeah, there we go. I have the clock there. So getting a nice sear and a nice crust and then flipping over and sticking it in the oven is a really great strategy for a lot of proteins. You can do that. I do that with tofu. I do it with fish. I do it with fish a lot. And then also with chicken. That's a really good strategy. Now, if we talked about other crusts, if you'd used pecans, for instance, pecans, a couple of things, or any other nuts. I'm just thinking of pecans because I do use that a lot. If you're using any other nuts, you want to make sure you smash them enough so that they're fine enough so that they stick, because big pecans are going to fall off. You may also want to do a little bit of like a glue of some sort, because sesame seeds stick really easily, but the heavier the item, like a pecan, the more likely it's going to be to fall off. So what you could do is, like, you could, if you're doing chicken, put salt and pepper chicken, and then you can even put like a nice little sprinkle of like herb de Provence or something on it if you wanted to, and then put a little bit like Dijon mustard. Dijon mustard is a really good glue for a crust. You know what else is a good glue? Don't freak out when I say this, but mayonnaise. Mayonnaise is a really good glue for crust, especially with fish. So sometimes you can just put like a tiny bit of mayonnaise, like with a little brush, and just brush a tiny bit on there, and you put on some sort of crust, and that helps it stick. Now you could also do a full breading station, you know, which then involves, you know, like egg wash, and that's kind of a whole different project. So different level of involvement. But anyway, so there you go. Those are the options for the crusting. Oh, I mentioned breadcrumbs earlier. The breadcrumbs can kind of stick at the bottom and kind of be a little bit tricky. So what I would probably do is I would probably just sear and then maybe put breadcrumbs on top right before I put it in the oven. I might do that. Or I would use like a glue of some sort. Breadcrumbs are a little bit trickier. Also, I tend to do more like nuts and seeds and things like that for crust. But anyway, if you want to do breadcrumbs, you can could also just not do the sear and just do breadcrumbs on top, and they kind of crisp up in the oven. Sometimes I'll toss them with a little bit of oil or spray a little bit of oil on top of them, so it gets a little bit crispier, not quite just bready, but more crunchy. So that gives you a little bit more of that oven fried vibe. So and then the other one that I love to use a lot is I do use almond flour. I love almond flour for kind of crusting vibes. So that, and in that case, almond flour is so bland that I will actually put flavoring in my paper plate with the, you know, with the almond flour. So there we go. Okay, so now we've covered breading. All right, let's go back to our good friend, the sauce. Do you remember the sauce? We just put some stock and some vinegar, some wine, some aromatics, meaning onion and garlic. And then we did some miso to give it some of that kind of creamy body. Do you see that? How it kind of looks kind of creamy and body, that has like a nice body to it. And then what we'll do is, we're going to just use a slotted spoon to pull out all these goodies. And what you want to do, you can either use a strainer like this, or you can just use a slotted spoon. But whatever you do, kind of give a little press to those aromatics, because there's a lot of good flavor and juice stuck in those aromatics, and you want all of that to go into your sauce. So just give it a gentle press, and we'll stick it in there. This is going to be discarded. The aromatics. Let's go right in there. Let me just check and make sure there's nothing else floating in there. All right. So what I want you to take away from this is the strategy of boiling up some aromatics in a pan with essentially some fancy broth or liquid, and that is going to be the base of our sauce. Okay, that's boil it up, let it sit, and then strain it out, and it's going to be ready to be a sauce. All right, let's get rid of this guy. Okay, so now we've got our sauce right here. What we're going to do is we're going to add in, we're going to whisk in our butter. Now, let's see, how can I do that? My butter's kind of getting a little melty. Ideally, this would be a little bit colder, but it's
How much butter do you have there?
You know, a tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, somewhere in that neighborhood. Butter to finish your sauce is like one of the best little tricks you can have up your sleeve, because you can like do almost anything and then whisk in some butter at the end, and it'll be tasty and amazing. I'm also going to show you something. This sauce, if you wanted to, you could like boil this down and simmer it and make it kind of thicker and richer and denser. And that would, in fact, you know what? Let me see. These are our fishes. Let me just show you. Oh yeah, you know what? We got a minute. Hold on. Let me just show you something. Okay. Anytime you're making a sauce and you're like throwing stuff all together and like, you know, putting it all together, before you add in the butter, if you just put it on high heat and let it bubble for a minute or two, that right there is going to concentrate those flavors and make that sauce feel velvety and rich and amazing. So like that extra minute or two of just like taking whatever sauce it is and reducing it down, that minute or so is going to make a huge difference in your flavor. So if you make, like, say, a pot roast, you know, go ahead, get the stuff out, put the pot roast onto your platter, and the juices, put them in a pan and just boil them down for like a minute or so. It doesn't even take that long. So that right there is the secret to having that really rich flavor that kind of coats your throat and makes it feel like it's something special and not just, you know, what it really is, which is, you know, chicken broth from a carton thrown together with a few flavorings. So, okay, so it's boiling over here, and I'm just gonna give it a little turn, make sure there's nothing kind of sticking to the side. I'm gonna let that boil just for a minute. Why don't I take a question while that reduces, and then we're gonna finish the sauce, and I think our fish is gonna be done. Any questions?
Yeah, we have a couple questions going back to pans. So one, are there any specific brands of nonstick pans that you would recommend? And then two, would you recommend searing on a nonstick pan, or maybe stainless steel, or even cast iron?
Okay, yeah, so brands. I will say this, I have some nonstick high-end brands like the Calphalon, whatever. What I have discovered is that I don't like to keep a nonstick pan for very long. So that leaves me with the conundrum of throwing away a $200 pan after a year, which makes me sad because that's just not how I roll. So here's what I do. I usually get my nonstick pan. I get whatever high quality one that I can find that doesn't have, you know, the BPAs and the you know, the chemicals and all of that. I get them from Costco because they tend to be in that mid price. I don't get like the $8 pan, but I get like a $30 pan or $39.99 pan. And that way then I feel like I can throw it away after a year. So that's what I do now. I actually still have some Calphalon, which is exactly why, because I got a whole set anyway, whatever. And so that's what I do. And I will say it does lose its non-stickiness and whatever. Anyway, okay, so that, and then, cast iron is great. I love cast iron. If you really want like a deep crust, and then, you know, you're willing to really get in there and do, great. Fish, though, is a little bit delicate. Cast iron to me is my pan of choice for meats. I love cast iron, and I also love stainless steel, but those are really for my meats. For my fish and my eggs, I tend to use nonstick. And then if I use nonstick, then I use this kind of, you know, like a coated pan. My fish one, it just broke. I had a nice fish one, but now it's gone. But then if I'm using my cast iron, then I'm like, okay, you know what? I mean business. This chicken is not sticking. And if the chicken is sticking too much in, not cast iron, in my stainless steel, I use this. If your chicken is sticking with this and you're mean business, it's because your chicken isn't cooked yet. So let it cook another minute or so and it'll kind of unstick itself. But fish can be a little bit delicate. Okay, so let me show you. This has been boiling down. I don't know if you can see, it's a little bit thicker. All right. I'm gonna let that cool off just a second, just so it's not boiling. When you put your butter in, here's the trick, okay? You want to get your butter in and you want to whisk it before the butter melts. Does that make sense? Why? Because then the butter will emulsify, which means that the water and the butter will coexist and wrap around each other and become creamy and delicious, and not like a really bad Italian dressing where the vinegar is, you know, one place and the oil's down here, right? You want it to be creamy and emulsified. So in order to do that, two things. One, you want the butter to be cold. This has been sitting out. It's a little bit warm, so it's not ideal. And two, you want the sauce not to be boiling hot. You want it just to sit for just a second or so, like how I just did it. Okay, and then we're also gonna whisk in one pat at a time. So we'll put it in, and what you want to do is kind of whisk right away. Like, don't put it in and then walk away, because it will melt and float on top. This way you can get it to emulsify. By the way, if we were doing the Dijon idea, here's where we put the Dijon in. we put the Dijon here. If we were doing Dijon instead of the miso, the Dijon itself is an emulsification. Mustard is, meaning the oil and the water coming together. So it actually will help the butter emulsify as well. So I put in the Dijon first, and then I put in the butter. If I were making a butter sauce. I mean, if I were making a Dijon sauce. There we go. Okay. Now I had to do that without you seeing because I didn't want the butter to melt and get all floaty. You know, I don't want it floaty. We don't want butter floating. Okay. But let's see. Hold on. Let me see if I can do this so you can see. Okay. All right. Can you see that it is not floaty and it all looks like one cohesive sauce? That butter right there is what is going to make the flavor go throughout your whole mouth. That butter brings everything together. We no longer are going to taste the miso separate from the onion, separate from the garlic. Nope. That butter brings it all together. If you ever make something that you're like, huh, something's missing, like I have all these spices, I have all whatever, chances are you're probably missing one of two things. One, you're either missing salt, not possible here because we got miso, and miso is salty, my friend. The second thing you might be missing is fat. Fat and salt. If you make black beans and they're tasting like, kind of blah, whatever, I promise you, it is salt or fat. You probably need to add fat. That's my guess. Okay, let's check on our, oof. Oh, come here, my
Melissa,
friends.
how long was the fish in the oven for?
Well, ideally, one second. Ideally, 8 to 11 minutes, 6 to 11, depending on how thick your fish is. This was in here for, I see 12. So that's a little longer than I would like. This is gonna be a little more cooked than I would like. With salmon, let me just show you something. Hold on, don't go away. Let me see, where is it? Okay. This is the best purchase you can make if you are serious about making your proteins fantastic. And it's just a thermometer, right? And you just go ahead and you check the temperature on your fish, on your steak. Like if you grill, honestly, use this. Yes, you can feel meat, but this is where it's at. So you want to have your salmon to be like anywhere between like 135. Yeah, this is 160. Yeah, that's a little more than I would like. Salmon can be really medium rare is best, which is about 135. Most people like salmon in that 140 range. My husband likes it at like 120, 125. That's a little too rare for me. But yeah, so pork, you want to be in 155, 160. So this is really higher than I would like for it to be, but it was in there for 12 minutes and I was chatting. So yeah, so you really want to think about 6 to 11 minutes, depending on how thick it is. And then check with your trusty thermometer. You want to be at 130, 135 is a good solid salmon number. And I'm going to get these off of here quickly because they just continue to cook. Let's see, let's do this guy here. 1 second, I'll be back. Okay. All right, let's get you guys, we'll just use you again, onto a plate. If you have overcooked, no biggie, get the fish off of the heat source quickly so that the carryover heat doesn't cook it even more. Okay, ready? Let's get this guy out of the way. La, la, la. Okay, and let me see, where can I set this guy? Okay, I'm gonna set it here. I'm gonna show it to you, but I'm gonna set it there. Okay, so we finished the sauce with our good friend, the butter. And let's use this and just pour a little bit on the plate. Just the miso sauce on top. I'm going to show it to you. I know you're far away. There we go. Just pour a little bit on top. If you overcook, just over sauce. And that's fine. And honestly, you know what I've been known to do? Is if I overcook a protein, I'll plate it and then I'll go and I'll set it outside real quickly. Even though it's not cold outside, it's still usually colder outside than it is by your oven. So anyway, that's a tip that you can use if you want. I will serve some of this sauce into a bowl, kind of like on the side or on the plate, on the table. And then I'm going to top with some chives. And, you know, listen, I've got chives. You could use chopped green onion. I like the flavor of the chive. So you could also use just some herbs. You could use parsley. You could use cilantro would be really lovely here. But I do like having some grassy onion vibe going. So I do like the chives. So there you go. That is your miso salmon, which I hope you know you can make with other proteins as well. Great. Okay, I'm going to set this down, and then I'm going to move us over here. And I think we have a few minutes for some questions. You know what? I'll take this over here with me.
Yeah,
okay.
We have a few more questions.
Sorry if I which project us.
Whenever you're ready.
I'm just going to move over here. And go right here. Okay.
So Melissa, this is either late lunch or early dinner for you. But what will you be eating with the salmon on the side?
Oh, okay, great. I'm so glad you asked. For fish, I am a huge fan of, let me see this, I feel like the lighting is not great here. I am a huge fan of cabbage with my fish. I always have cabbage, and I make cabbage salads all the time with fish. So I tend to lean toward that because I like the crunchiness. Like fish can be so, like this is going to be like silky and fatty and luscious and kind of like creamy and a little bit filling and kind of comfort food. And so to kind of have a play in opposites, I love crunchy cabbage salads that are kind of tangy, maybe a little bit spicy, maybe with cilantro. So I kind of go that vibe. And I definitely will have something with some acid in it. So the salad will have some sort of acid in it. That could be a cabbage salad with like lime, or I could also do like a kale salad with a lot of lemon. So I like to have a lot of the lemon and those vibes in my side dish, because even though I will serve this with a piece of lime or lemon, this isn't like that kind of summer grilled fish with like, you know, preserved lemons. It's not really lemony. So I kind of like that brightness. This is kind of more silky and filling. So I will go cabbage salad or kale salad, something with a lot of citrus. And then I know rice is a great choice, super easy to do. And listen, I think it's fabulous. I love it. But I love potatoes. I love potatoes with fish. So if I can, I try to do some sort of potato something if I can. That's probably my favorite. But you know, potatoes sometimes take a little bit more thinking through than rice, because rice literally I can like pull out an Instant Pot or a rice cooker and like do that in minutes while I'm waiting for, you know, the salmon to cook or whatever.
That sounds great. What will you be drinking with the salmon? What wine can you recommend for us?
I'm such a bad person to ask because I don't drink. So I'm like a bubbly water fanatic. So that's what I will be drinking. And I think you probably want something a little bit more sophisticated than to say, I don't know, probably something white. I don't know. My husband's not here anymore. He's French and he drinks wine. Well, that said, I was a waitress for years, and all through my time at Georgetown. And I think that probably this one I would say maybe like a Pinot Grigio or something, you know, that's light but still has some like oomph in it and isn't like overly, you know, oaky or something.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
We have one more question about the recipe, and then I think we can move on to some of the submitted questions.
Okay.
With the strained out aromatics, can you reuse them, or are they kind of done?
They're done. They're done. They've fulfilled their destiny, and they're okay. They're okay to leave.
Awesome.
They're done.
All right, and then one last question about the recipe. How do you mask the smell of fish? It's great, but it's sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's an excellent question because I have 3 non-fish eaters in my family. Which is why I have a lot of experience swapping out proteins and doing the same recipe, but like 3 different pans and 3 different proteins, because I also have a vegetarian. So yeah, it is an issue. Here's the good news is that if you cook fish, the secret to salmon especially, because salmon is oily and it kind of has a little bit of a richer flavor and a richer aroma. The secret to cooking salmon is high heat and fast or low heat and slow. And high heat and fast, the good news is you're in and you're out, and that's not really where the problem comes from. But I do think that there's probably a good reason for why I tend to cook most of my fish outside. But sometimes you just need like a quick pan on it. And if you just turn on the fan, I didn't turn it on today because of sound, but if you just turn on the fan and this is really a 12-minute project. It really is. So it's in and it's out and it's sort of fine. But yeah, to answer your question, like, you know what, like the big platters of baked fish that my mom used to make when I was growing up, and they would go in the oven for 45 minutes and whatever. Yeah, that I don't do. Kind of because of that. Well, and also fish shouldn't be cooked for 45 minutes, but that's a different story.
Awesome. So Melissa, you have an MBA from Georgetown. How did you end up as a celebrity chef? Like, what is the path that took you from Georgetown, from the world of business to the Food Network?
Yeah, that's a circuitous path that probably makes sense to only the people who know me really well. But I think the question is really about kind of the logistics and like how that, you know, what did that look like and what was that path? And so after business school, I worked in business for a number of years. I was a consultant, and then I worked in strategy and finance for the Walt Disney Company for a number of years. And I was living in Paris. I got sent to Euro Disney for a few years. And while I was living in Paris, that's where I met my husband. And then that's when I became a stay-at-home mom. And then as a stay-at-home mom, I had 4 babies, 4 kids in diapers. They were 2, 1, and then 0, 0. The twins were babies. And that's when I started thinking, okay, I need to sort of kind of transition into something again. You know, I'd had this career in corporate finance, but what exactly that looked like, I wasn't sure. And so I started doing speaking about money saving strategies, really thinking about like, if I can find, you know, $2 million for the Walt Disney Company before our results, you know, post next Thursday, I can find, you know, $75 to save on our P&L as a family. And so I kind of took that knowledge and I started doing speaking about money saving strategies, some of which were in the kitchen, most of which were not in the kitchen. You know, it was like how to save on your real estate bill, how to save money everywhere in your house. But the topics that just everyone was most excited about had to do with food. And so people always wanted to know like about like the food money saving strategy. So that kind of led to me doing a lot of talking about food and money saving in the kitchen. And as a side note, I had cooked my whole life, and in fact was a live-in cook for part of my MBA experience. I lived in with the family and was a full-time cook for them. And so kind of all these sort of experiences came together, and then that led me to being on Next Food Network Star and then being on Food Network. And so that, you know, that's sort of how it happened. That said, I fully credit a lot of what I learned as a businesswoman and originally as a business student at Georgetown for helping me win Food Network Star, because spoiler alert, there are better cooks than I am. You know, if you've opened 30 restaurants and have been a professional chef for 20 years, you know, you're probably a more accomplished chef than I am, right? So that's not how I won it. I didn't win it by being the best cook. I think you have to be a good cook, you know, right? Nobody wants to take advice from somebody who doesn't cook well. But I think that, you know, the difference between a threshold competency and a competitive advantage is something that I understood innately. And I understood that my cooking was my threshold competency, my what I needed to throw my hat into the ring and play the game of Food Network Star. But that wasn't how I was going to win it. I won it by my competitive advantage, which was that I had 4 kids and I knew how to get dinner on the table, and I grew up on a budget, so I know how to save money in the kitchen. And so I think that came from my MBA experience at Georgetown and from the career that I had afterward. So, so it sounds like, wait, what, MBA? And then you left it all and became a TV person. No, it felt more like a pivot, and it really felt like a leveraging of these unique experiences that kind of came together and kind of pushed me into this new career in this new space. So, yeah.
Amazing. That's really fascinating. Thank you, Melissa. Everyone, this is all the time we have. Thank you so much, Melissa, for teaching us how to cook. I'm very excited to try this recipe out on my own. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded, so in the next few days, expect an email with the webinar recording, the recipe, as well as a survey that we're going to ask you to fill out and help us, improve and think of different topics for next time. But thank you, Melissa. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we're looking forward to hopefully cooking with you again. Awesome. All right. Thank you.